Now, Sky News understands European nations are set to withdraw their threat to boycott FIFA competitions, but are discussing other protests against Gianni Infantino's ongoing leadership of the organisation.
What looked like a routine disagreement inside world football quickly grew into something much bigger. Behind closed doors, frustration had reportedly been building across Europe, with some national associations considering a move that could have sent shockwaves through FIFA and its biggest competitions. For a while, the possibility of European nations refusing to participate was no longer being treated as empty noise.
UEFA is set to lift its boycott of FIFA competitions. It clears the way for England's young Lionesses to take part in the Under-20 Women's World Cup next week in Poland.
It was becoming a serious threat, putting FIFA President Gianni Infantino under even more pressure at a time when questions surrounding his leadership were already getting louder. Now, though, the temperature appears to be dropping. European nations are reportedly backing away from the threat of boycotting upcoming FIFA competitions, suggesting that one of the most dramatic options on the table may have been pushed aside. But this does not necessarily mean everyone suddenly made peace.
UEFA leaders are meeting here in Monaco. It was a month ago that they threatened to boycott FIFA competitions unless Gianni Infantino abandoned plans to try to sell shares in the World Cup. That did happen. They also wanted assurances that, as they put it, he would never try to disfigure the game in such a way again.
The tension is still sitting right under the surface, and the focus now appears to be shifting toward finding another way to make their frustration clear without pulling teams out of major tournaments. For England, the immediate impact is important. The team is now expected to compete as scheduled next week at the Under-20s Women's World Cup, avoiding the uncertainty that had started hanging over participation. That tournament carries extra attention because it will be the first major FIFA event since Infantino came under heavy criticism over his controversial attempt to sell shares connected to the World Cup to private investors.
UEFA is still opposing Infantino's ongoing leadership of FIFA. It's unclear what mechanisms that they will still be pursuing to challenge his leadership. They have threatened legal action and demanded that all those at FIFA do keep all their correspondence relating to this venture they tried to launch with the brother of the son-in-law of Donald Trump, as this civil war does still grip football, particularly here in Monaco, as European football leaders are meeting ahead of the new season launch for the men's games.
That proposal quickly became another major talking point around FIFA. Critics raised concerns about money, control, and what increased private investment could mean for the future of the World Cup. The argument was no longer simply about one financial idea. It opened up a much wider conversation about where international football could be heading, who gets influence over its biggest competitions, and whether FIFA's leadership is taking the game in a direction that some powerful football nations simply do not want to follow. That is where this story gets more complicated. According to Sky News, European nations are now expected to step away from the boycott threat, but the wider dispute with FIFA has not disappeared. Instead, discussions are reportedly continuing over other possible forms of protest against Infantino and his leadership. In other words, the most extreme move may be off the table for now, while the political battle behind the scenes keeps moving. And that could create a very different kind of confrontation.
Still, UEFA, along with their counterparts from the Asian and North American confederations, pushing for a change of president at FIFA, all building up to the election next March, a deadline in November for candidates to come forward. Still no clear anti-Infantino candidate has been brought to the table.
Rather than refusing to play, European associations could potentially look for ways to publicly signal their opposition while still sending their teams onto the pitch. Exactly what those actions might look like remains unclear, so speculation should not be treated as confirmed fact. What does appear clear from the reporting is that the disagreement has moved beyond a simple argument over participation. The boycott threat itself showed just how strained the relationship had reportedly become. Walking away from FIFA competitions would have been a massive call for European football, affecting players, supporters, broadcasters, sponsors, and tournament organizers. Backing away from that option removes an immediate crisis, but it also leaves the bigger issue unresolved. European nations can continue competing while still challenging decisions coming from the top of FIFA, creating an awkward situation where both sides remain tied together despite serious disagreements.
Certainly, they are strategising in and around UEFA. The first tactic they deployed was warning of a boycott by European nations of FIFA competitions. One issue was that would have meant that the young girls would have been impacted at a tournament that doesn't really have much visibility, really about youth development. So it means that England and the other teams can plan now for that tournament to take place in Poland next month. It is a stage for Gianni Infantino to show he is leading FIFA if he does go to the tournament in Poland at a time when he's also touring various member associations around the world.
So the story is no longer simply about whether European teams will show up. The bigger question is what happens when they do. England is expected to take its place at the Under-20s Women's World Cup, and other European nations appear ready to continue participating in FIFA events, but attention will now turn toward any protests or coordinated action that could emerge around those competitions. With criticism of Infantino's leadership still part of the wider debate, the next clash may happen without a single team needing to walk away. England now finds itself right in the middle of a football power struggle that has gone far beyond what happens on the pitch. After weeks of uncertainty, the team is expected to compete as planned next week at the Under-20s Women's World Cup. But this will not feel like just another tournament. It is set to become the first FIFA event since Mr. Infantino's presidency was pushed into a major crisis following his attempt to sell shares in the World Cup to private investors. That proposal caused a serious backlash across European football, turning what might have looked like a business decision into a much bigger fight over money, influence, and who gets a say in the future of the world's biggest football competition.
Very much using money as the way of saying why he should stay in power from a scandal and controversy that was all about money, with his claims that he'd raise a lot more money for the FAs all around the world if they approved of this scheme, which would have seen 20% of the World Cup sold off to private investors.
The drama had reportedly been building for weeks. Last month, UEFA announced plans to boycott FIFA competitions as part of an effort to pressure Gianni Infantino into abandoning the controversial proposal. That was no small move. A boycott involving European teams could have created major problems for FIFA competitions and placed even more heat on its leadership. Eventually, that pressure appeared to get results, with Mr. Infantino backing away from the plan to privatize part of the World Cup operation. On paper, that looked like a major win for UEFA. Behind the scenes, however, European officials were apparently not ready to simply shake hands and move on. For UEFA, dropping the proposal did not erase the concerns that had already been raised. The European governing body wanted something stronger than a change of direction. It wanted assurances that another proposal of this kind would not suddenly appear further down the road. UEFA made that position clear, saying, a condition for European teams to return to FIFA competitions would be assurances such attempts to disfigure the game in this way will never be made again. Those words showed just how deep the disagreement had become, because UEFA was no longer only challenging one proposal, it was questioning how FIFA could approach major decisions affecting international football in the future. That changed the whole vibe of the dispute. Behind closed doors, the argument had grown into a wider battle over trust, control, and how much freedom FIFA's leadership should have when making huge commercial decisions. European officials were looking for guarantees about what might come next, while FIFA faced pressure to prove that another major shakeup would not be pushed forward without serious resistance. Even with the boycott threat beginning to ease, that underlying clash remained, leaving both sides dealing with a relationship that had already taken a serious hit. Now the situation has taken another sharp turn, and the immediate crisis appears to be fading. UEFA is understood to have received the assurances it had been demanding from FIFA, with the finer details expected to be discussed during meetings in Monaco on Thursday. That development changes the picture in a big way. The immediate threat of European teams boycotting the Under-20s tournament in Poland has now been lifted, meaning the competition can move forward without the massive disruption that had been hanging over it. But while the boycott drama may be cooling down, the tension behind it has not simply vanished. FIFA has now publicly addressed the situation, choosing a much calmer tone rather than trading political shots with UEFA. With questions continuing around its leadership and future direction, the organization is trying to shift the spotlight toward unity, cooperation, and the development of football around the world. It is a clear attempt to bring the temperature down while keeping communication open with the powerful organizations that help run the international game. A FIFA spokesperson said, "FIFA strongly believes that football has the power to unite, even in challenging circumstances, and looks forward to welcoming all teams and players to Poland. We remain committed to how we can further support the global development of the game, through our competitions, through the FIFA Forward program, and through our various other initiatives, and in full dialogue with the confederations and stakeholders." That statement is carefully measured. Rather than directly going after UEFA or reopening the argument over the controversial proposal, FIFA is putting the competition and its wider football programs front and center. The message is basically about keeping everyone at the table and showing that the organization wants dialogue instead of another public showdown. Still, that calmer language does not erase the serious disagreement that brought both sides to this point. And the timing could make everything even more intense. FIFA's next senior international tournament will be the main Women's World Cup, which begins next June. Before that tournament even starts, however, FIFA is due to hold its presidential election in March. That means the arguments surrounding Gianni Infantino's position could carry straight into a major political moment for the organization, with every decision potentially facing even more scrutiny. European football's governing body has already been at the center of a wider international effort to remove Mr. Infantino from power. During this dispute, the possibility of boycotting FIFA competitions became one of UEFA's strongest pieces of leverage. European officials were effectively showing that they were prepared to consider keeping teams away if FIFA continued moving forward with the controversial sell-off scheme. That pressure appears to have played a role in changing the situation. The proposal was ultimately withdrawn, and UEFA has now reportedly received the additional assurances it wanted. But that does not automatically settle the much bigger fight over FIFA's leadership. The boycott weapon may have been put away for the moment, yet the political struggle surrounding Infantino remains very much alive, especially with a presidential election getting closer and both sides knowing the next confrontation could carry even higher stakes. This might be an under 2-0 tournament, but the real action surrounding it could be happening far away from the pitch. It will never pull the same gigantic worldwide audience as the Senior World Cup. Yet politically, this event could carry far more weight inside FIFA than most people would expect. For Gianni Infantino, it offers something particularly valuable at a difficult moment. A highly visible international stage where he can appear in command as FIFA president while the pressure surrounding his leadership keeps growing. And that pressure is not coming from random voices on the outside. Behind the scenes, some seriously influential figures in world football are reportedly pushing back against Mr. Infantino. He is facing opposition from FIFA vice presidents representing Asia, Europe, and North America, giving this leadership dispute a genuinely international dimension. Suddenly, a tournament that would normally stay outside the biggest headlines has another layer attached to it, becoming part of a much larger political struggle over who should lead FIFA and what direction the organization should take. That becomes even more interesting with FIFA's presidential election moving closer. In recent days, Mr. Infantino and FIFA have placed major attention on the amount of money generated by the organization and, importantly, how much funding has been invested back into football associations around the world. On its own, highlighting those financial numbers might look like normal FIFA business. But with a leadership contest approaching and opposition building, the timing naturally puts every public move under the microscope. There is another detail that makes those associations incredibly important. FIFA's presidential election does not work like a system where football's biggest countries automatically carry the most power. Each eligible member association gets a vote of equal weight. A smaller football nation, therefore, has the same voting power in the presidential election as one of the sport's traditional giants. That creates a very different political game, because building broad support across FIFA's worldwide membership can be far more important than simply winning over the most famous football nations. That is why FIFA's record of investing money into associations around the globe has become such a significant talking point during this tense period. Those development funds support football projects in different countries, while the associations receiving them also form part of the membership that can eventually decide who sits at the top of FIFA. There is no basis here to say that the funding itself is tied to votes, but with an election approaching, the political importance of FIFA's relationship with its member associations is impossible to ignore. Mr. Infantino, however, has not publicly connected his recent activity with next year's presidential vote. Officially, the race has not yet reached its full campaign period either. So while his appearances, FIFA's financial messaging, and the growing opposition to his leadership are all drawing attention at the same time, they should not automatically be presented as one coordinated election strategy without evidence. For now, that leaves a fascinating power game developing in the background. The Under-20s tournament may look small compared with FIFA's blockbuster events, but it arrives at a moment when relationships inside the organization matter enormously. With influential opponents challenging Mr. Infantino and every eligible association eventually holding an equal vote, even the quieter corners of world football suddenly carry serious political weight. And this is where the FIFA power struggle could get even more interesting, because the biggest moves may still be waiting around the corner. The key deadline does not arrive until November, giving potential challengers more time to decide whether they are truly ready to step into the race and take on one of the most powerful positions in world football. Anyone hoping to become an official presidential candidate must first secure the required backing of 5 football associations, meaning private conversations and political relationships across the game could become increasingly important as that deadline gets closer. Until those names are officially confirmed, nothing is completely locked in. Every public appearance, major FIFA announcement, meeting with football officials, and visible show of support could receive extra attention. Some of those moments may simply be normal business, so they should not automatically be treated as campaign moves. But in this kind of political environment, people will naturally be watching closely for clues about who is gaining support, who might be preparing a challenge, and where the different football associations could eventually stand. That is what makes the next few months so important. Gianni Infantino may remain at the center of the story, but the bigger picture involves an entire network of associations and senior football officials with their own views about FIFA's future. With every eligible association ultimately carrying an equal vote in the presidential election, even support that might look small from the outside could become extremely valuable once the numbers start adding up. November will therefore be the first major checkpoint. Once the nomination deadline arrives and the required backing has been secured, the football world should finally get a clearer look at who is actually prepared to enter this leadership battle. Until then, expect plenty of attention around FIFA, plenty of political noise, and plenty of questions about what is really happening behind closed doors. And if you want to stay locked in as this FIFA story develops, make sure you like the video, share it with someone who follows the game, and subscribe to Matchio for more football stories, controversies, and major updates from around the world. Turn on notifications as well, so you do not miss what comes next, because with the November deadline approaching and the presidential race still taking shape, this story could have a lot more twists before everything is settled. Thanks for watching and supporting Matchio. Peace.